name is Cornelia Flora. It doesn't matter very much. But the one thing that does matter is I'm part of a really exciting group called Grassroots for Bernie that are so thrilled and honored to have Bernie Sanders here right after he declared that he is going to be a Democratic candidate for the United States presidency. And understands how it's possible to make people's lives better, but not have an intrusive power in everybody's mailbox or telephone. So, louder, okay. Okay, is this better? He has an amazing history of both administrative and legislative accomplishments, and most importantly, he has a vision for a United States that is just and fair to all people who live here. I am pleased to present to you the next President of the United States.
Crisis already. Okay. Okay, can people hear? Yeah. Okay. This is an incredible turnout, and I want to thank all of you for being here and for the organizers of this event for their help in making this possible, and to all of the folks on the outside, thanks very much for being here as well. Let me begin by just telling you a little bit about what's been going on in the last week. About a week ago, we had, well, less than that, my goodness, it was Tuesday. In my hometown of Burlington, Vermont, on Lake Champlain, we had over 5,000 people coming out to formally kick off the campaign. And then we went to 3 events in New Hampshire in which there were overflow crowds, and in Portsmouth we had about 700 people out. And then we came to Iowa. Oh my God! Unbelievable. In Davenport we had, I don't know what it was, 700 or 800 people out. And this morning we were in Iowa City. I mean, the place was small, and look at what's going on here. So thank you very much all for being here. All right, what I want to do is do what a lot of politicians don't do, and what the media doesn't do, and that is actually talk about the real issues impacting people's lives. How's that? I know that that's a radical idea, but that's what we're going to do. And then, as best we can, we're going to try to do some questions and answers after I'm finished. But I think the first point that I want to make, I'm going to start off by telling you, but I think in your heart of hearts, many of you know, but I think there are very few elected officials who will tell you this. And here's the simple truth. We need a political revolution in this country. Now, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is we could have the best president possible in the White House, but that president cannot accomplish anything unless there is a mass movement of people who stand up loudly and clearly in support of that president and say enough is enough. The billionaires who own this country cannot have it all. We need a country and a government which works for all of us and not just a handful of wealthy individuals. And the point to be made is that nothing happens unless millions of people make it clear that it must happen. That government must respond to our needs and not the needs of the few. So let me just touch on a few of the issues that are out there. In my view, the issue of income and wealth inequality is the moral issue of today. It is the economic issue of today. It is the political issue of today. We are living in a nation which has more income and wealth inequality than any other major industrialized nation on earth, that has more income and wealth inequality than any time since 1929, just before the Great Depression. We are living in a country, if you can believe this, where the top 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. We are living in a country where 99% of all new income is going to the top 1%. We are living in a country where one family, the Walton family, owns more wealth than the bottom 130 million Americans. We are living in a family where in the last 2 years, the wealthiest 14 people saw their wealth increase by $157 billion, which is more wealth than is owned by the bottom 40% of the American people. This type of income and wealth inequality will destroy this country if we do not begin to turn it around. But it's not only income and wealth inequality, it is the state of the economy in terms of what's happening to ordinary people. And here's the truth, and many of you know this, that for the last 40 years in this country, not the last 7 years, the last 40 years, we have seen a middle class in this country, which was once the envy of the world. We have seen that middle class year after year after year disappear. In my state of Vermont, and I'm sure it is not dissimilar here in Iowa, we have people who work not just one job, they're working 2 jobs, they're working 3 jobs, trying to cobble together an income and some health insurance. That's the reality. And in America today, real unemployment is not the 5.4% you read in the papers. Real unemployment is close to 11% if you include those people who have given up looking for work and those people who are working part-time. Because many of the new jobs that are being created are part-time jobs. Today's economy allows 17% of our young people to be unemployed. And for African American youth, the numbers are off the charts. All of this is taking place despite a huge increase in technology and a huge increase in productivity. So the simple question is, why is it that people work longer hours for lower wages despite the fact that they are producing more? We need an economy which works for all of our people and not just a handful on the top. Income and wealth inequality is an evil unto itself, but it spills over to another enormous issue. And let me be as blunt as I can and tell you what you already know. As a result of the disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, the American political system has been totally corrupted. And the foundations of American democracy are being undermined. What the Supreme Court has said to our people is what they have said is, okay, the billionaires already own much of the economy. We are now going to give them the opportunity to buy the United States government and state governments all over our country, And that is not what democracy is supposed to be about. There are media reports out there, which say that the Koch brothers alone, just one family, in this campaign cycle will spend more money than either the Democratic or Republican parties. One family spending almost $1 billion, maybe more, to elect candidates who will make the rich richer and everybody else poorer. Brothers and sisters, this is not democracy. This is a movement toward oligarchy. And that is why we must overturn through a constitutional amendment this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court. And in years to come, we have got to move this country to public funding of elections so people can run for office. People can run for office without having to worry about being beholden to the wealthy and the powerful. Yeah. Now I want to touch on another issue, which is of enormous consequence, not just to our country, but to the world. And that is, we have got to understand that what the scientists are telling us in overwhelming numbers is true. Yes. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. Climate change is tragically already causing very serious problems, as you all know, in our country and around the world. And what the scientists are telling us is that we have a short window of opportunity to transform our energy system. And if we are not successful in doing that, the planet, in many ways, that we are going to be leaving our kids and our grandchildren will become increasingly uninhabitable. And that means more drought, more flooding, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean and all that that means to mammal life. It will mean more famine in those countries where people cannot grow the food that they need. And it will mean more disease and human suffering. We have the moral responsibilities as keepers of this planet to make sure that we do not destroy it for our kids and our grandchildren. And interestingly, needless to say, as perhaps the most progressive member of the Senate, I have my disagreements with Republicans. But on this issue, I want to say two things about this issue. First of all, it is an intellectual embarrassment that you have the major political party in the United States Congress rejecting what the overwhelming number of scientists are saying. You cannot run a government, you cannot run a country, you cannot do serious public policy if it's not based on the foundations of science. So to reject that is extremely scary stuff. And the second point that I would make is, and I know, virtually all of the Republicans here, if you think that this is just that they're not smart enough to understand science, you would be mistaken. This gets back to the issue we talked about a moment ago about money in politics. The Koch brothers, ExxonMobil, and all of these big energy companies, they are making billions in the fossil fuel energy business right now. And it seems to me it's hard to understand, and I really don't, because I'm sure all these executives have kids and they have grandchildren. But apparently they are more concerned about their short-term profits today than they are about the planet they're going to leave their grandchildren. So this is where money and politics intertwines. Because the Koch brothers and the big energy companies that fund many of the Republicans have made it clear. that they are not allowed to stand up and tell us the truth about climate change. And that is another reason why we have to end this tyranny of money in the political process. Now, one wouldn't know it by the crowd that we have here today, and especially a lot of young people, and we're so delighted to see you all. But throughout this country, what a very serious problem is that there is a lot of demoralization, right, with regard to the political process. A lot of people are throwing up their hands and giving up in despair. But we cannot allow that to happen. Despair is not an option. That is exactly what these guys want us to feel, what they want us to say, what they are saying in so many words. You really think you can make a difference in changing this country? You can't. We've got all the money. We've got all the power. You can vote or you don't vote. It doesn't matter. We will continue to control this country. And what this meeting is about, and when we talk about a political revolution, we say the very opposite. And that is that we say this country belongs to all of us, not just to you. And you know what? We are going to change this country. And one way that we do that is that we have a simple and straightforward agenda. We break through all of the crap, we break through all of the political gossip and everything else, and we try to come up with some ideas, very concrete ideas, that will resonate with working families all over this country. Because one of the reasons that people have given up on the political process, they turn on the TV, they see these people babbling about, and when they look at the TV, they say, it's not relevant to my life. I can't afford childcare. My kid can't go to college. I don't have any health care. What are these people talking about? And our job is to come forward with an agenda, and it's going to be an evolving agenda. We want your input into that agenda. But an agenda of a number of key points that make sense to the American people. Let me begin a very brief overview of what that agenda should look like. Number one, when you go out and you talk to the American people, and you say, what is uppermost on your mind? Usually the response is a four-letter word called J-O-B-S, jobs. All right? People understand that we have unemployment rates which are much, much too high, and youth unemployment rates off the charts. We need a federal jobs program which puts millions of people back to work. All of you understand, it's true in Vermont, I know it's true in Iowa, and it's true all over this country, that we have an infrastructure, roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, levees, dams, airports, a rail system falling further and further behind the rest of the world. Our infrastructure is collapsing. We need to rebuild it, and we can create millions of jobs doing that. And when you talk about jobs, we have to talk about an issue that the media largely ignores, and that is trade policy. Trade policy. You're looking at a United States Senator and former Congressman who voted against NAFTA, against CAFTA, against permanent government trade relations with China. And is currently leading the opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And the bottom line here is we need trade policies not developed by corporate America and Wall Street and the drug companies. We need trade policies that work for the middle class and the working families of this country. So as president, we're going to rethink our entire trade policy. We're going to tell corporate America that maybe the time is now to start reinvesting in Iowa and Vermont and California, not just in China. Now, when you talk about wealth and power and recklessness and greed and dishonesty, those are just other words for Wall Street. In my view, it is time to break up the major financial institutions in this country. We have 6 financial institutions, most of them larger today than they were before we bailed them out, who have assets equivalent to some 60% of the GDP of the United States of America. They issue most of the credit cards and a lot of the mortgages that we have. They have shown themselves to have a business model which is based on fraud. Every week, with very weak regulation. It's not that we have a regulatory system which is really watching these guys closely. But they are so outrageous here in America and around the world that every other week you're seeing articles about a $5 billion fine here for this or a $1 billion fine here for that. So in my view, we need a financial system in which money goes into the productive economy, into those businesses which are actually producing something and creating jobs, rather than the gambling casino that is Wall Street. So bottom line, if a financial institution is too big to fail, it is too big to exist. We're going to break them up. Some of you may know, and some of you may not know, that shamefully the United States of America is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. And that's a shame we have got to end. Today, despite the gains of the Affordable Care Act, we have some 35 million Americans who continue to have no health insurance, and we have millions more who have inadequate insurance with high deductibles and high co-payments, and I expect some of you are in that boat, right? Yes. All right. Yes. Furthermore, our healthcare results are not particularly good compared to other countries. Our longevity is not as good as many other countries. We die earlier, our infant mortality rate is higher, and in a number of diseases, we are not doing as well as other countries in terms of treating them. So what we have got to do, and again, this is not quite a new idea because it exists all over the world, is what we have got to say are 2 fundamental things, 2 major points. Number one, in the United States of America, if you're rich, you're poor, you're black, you're white, you're old, you're young, health care is a right for all people. And number two, we need a cost-effective mechanism, approach, in order to provide quality, universal health care. And in my view, the best way forward is a Medicare for all, single-payer program. And what that will mean, I want you to appreciate, sometimes we don't fully appreciate what public policy is about, what, say, Social Security or Medicare mean to people. But I want you all to think what a universal healthcare system will mean in this country. It means that if you get ill, you can go to the doctor and not worry about a deductible or a copayment. It will mean that if you're in a job today that you don't like, but you're in that job because you're getting decent health care, you don't have to stay in that job. And I remember, there are a million of these stories. Just one pops into my mind. A couple of years ago I read, there was a guy, I don't know how old he is, older than one would think, who decided to re-enter the military, because he had been in the military. Why did he re-enter the military? Because his wife had breast cancer, and that was the only way that he could find employment that would pay for her health care. That's a little bit absurd in the United States of America, okay? Now there's another issue I want to touch on, which is needlessly, I think, an important issue here in Ames, Iowa. And here's the story. We all know that we live in a very competitive global economy. And we all know that if our country is going to create the kinds of jobs and have the quality of life we want, we need to have the best educated workforce in the world. Everybody understands this. And yet today, in this great country, we have hundreds of thousands of bright, qualified, young people who want to go to college, who want to get a higher education, but can't get that education because their family doesn't have enough money to pay for it. What kind of insanity is that? What that means is we are denying a ladder to the middle class, to millions and millions of people, but even worse, we are slowing down what this country can and should become. We are saying to all of these young people, we don't want your intellectual energy, your capabilities. We don't want you to get the education you can get in order to become doctors and scientists and engineers and teachers and do all of the things that our country needs. We're pushing you aside. We want to encourage people to get the best education possible, not discourage them. And then on top of that, you got another disaster, which, if you think it through, makes no sense at all. We have millions and millions of people, not just young people, but middle-aged people, who did go to college and came out of school hugely in debt. And they have this debt of $50,000 or $100,000 or more around their necks year after year, decade after decade. There are people who are out of school 20 years. They're paying 8-9% interest rates on their debt. This makes no sense at all. So we have introduced legislation which I will fight to implement as president, which does two things. First of all, it says that in the United States of America, for public colleges and public universities, tuition will be free. Now, to some people, this may think it's a radical idea. It is not a radical idea. Germany has tuition-free higher education. Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Chile has tuition-free higher education. And you know what's even more ironic? 45, 50 years ago in the United States of America, we used to have tuition-free higher education. 45 years ago, people could go to great public universities like the University of California or the City University of New York and public colleges all over America. They got into those schools regardless of the income of their families. If we could do that 50 years ago, we surely can do it today. Secondly, in terms of